The single most important skill set any entrepreneur needs to learn is delegation. Without question. There's not even a close second. With most businesses, there's three things to sell. There's people, there's processes, there's programs. Processes and programs are easily and instantly commoditizable. Everybody has access to effectively the same process management. If they don't, they can steal yours. And programs can be purchased and will be purchased. That's the whole point of the SaaS infrastructure. So unless you're a huge company that can build your own programs, the only thing you have left to rely on is people. This is true, by the way, if you're in the SaaS business or even the e-commerce business. You might say like, oh no, my product's a differentiator. It's the people that ideate and create the product. People are the most important facet of a business. And people are an absolute miracle. This is the thing that I take such umbrage with. The entire business world, and really spot check me on this, by the way. Please challenge me on the thesis that I'm about to offer you. The entire business world has taught all business owners and entrepreneurs to treat people as though they're commodities. And a commodity is something that is easily interchangeable. It's tradable. It's static. It's basic. So if you have an ear of corn and I have an ear of corn and we decide to trade, neither of us are worse or better off than we were a moment ago. That's a commodity. People are not commodities, obviously. One person does not equal another person, even if nearly everything about those people on paper is the same. So same age, same gender, same demographic, psychographic, same education, same history, same background. Even with everything being pari passu, people are so diverse, so unique, so precious. I hate to sound so dramatic, but it's true. And you know this when you've experienced the true beauty of what a human being is capable of. You've had those, and they might not even have been employees. It could be clients, vendors, strategic partners. When you see what a human is capable of when they're truly operating at their peak potential, and that's a statistical truism, by the way, and we can get to that in just a moment. But the first thing that needs to happen if you're going to learn how to hire, manage, delegate, train, is you need to change the way that you think about people. People are not commodities. They can't be. And you see this at work in every single business that exists. They either treat people like commodities and you get Quicken Loans, which is a horrible institution that will never go anywhere, or they treat people like literal miracles and you get outputs like Apple, Google, Zappos, like companies that have been able to do something that might have felt impossible. Look what Elon Musk has been able to do. Look what a human is able to do. Everything amazing that's ever been accomplished has been accomplished by people or something people have built. If you can integrate that in your mind, you then accept the idea and the fact that those people are available and accessible to you to hire. And that's the other interesting thing about people is that every human, I believe very strongly, and this is almost a religious truth, every human has the ability and the potential to be great. Very often what they need is they need the form within which that greatness can exist. Most people are not entrepreneurs. Thank God. Thank God. Which means most people don't think like you. So you as the entrepreneur, you're a natural born problem solver. You're going to be proactive. You're going to think through things. You're going to begin with the end in mind. And because that is such a knee-jerk response, you assume everybody else should think that way. And when people don't think that way, it frustrates you and you dismiss them as being stupid or lazy. And they're not. I promise you they're not. The key for you is to build an environment and a forum within which people actually are able to articulate their greatness, their unique capabilities. And when you do that, the potency of those people, again, is incalculable. And I'm trying not to be hyperbolic, but I promise you there's no hyperbole to it. There's no exaggeration in what a human being is capable of. And this is documented. It's a mathematical truth called the Pareto principle. If you're not familiar with the Pareto principle or the Pareto rule, it's the people call it the 80-20 rule. And it was an observation by an Italian mathematician, whose name was Pareto. And what he found was that in every organic ecosystem, there's a massive disparity between input and output. In every organic ecosystem, there's a massive disparity between input and output. And it's weird because it spans across levels of analysis that you wouldn't even begin to consider. Like 20% of the cows produce 80% of the milk, and 20% of the babies cry 80% of the time, and 20% of the criminals commit 80% of the crimes. But more importantly are economic truths like 20% of your customers are worth 80% of your revenue, or 20% of your employees do 80% of the work. Now you might think like, oh gosh, God, that's pretty significant, but it's fractal. And this is where things get not just important, but almost impossible to begin to fathom. So think about that on a fractal level. And fractal means true at every level of analysis, right? So if you had an organization, let's say with 1,000 employees, which is a pretty big size shop for a small business. It's still a small business, but it's a big, small business. If you had 1,000 employees, that means that 200 of those employees are doing 80% of the work. 200 of the employees are doing 80% of the output. And you think to yourself like, oh, okay, that's a heavy teeter-totter, let's say. But zoom in on those 200 employees. Of those 200, you have 40 doing 80% of that cohort's work. Of those 40, you have 8 doing 80% of that. And of those 8, you have 1.6 doing 80% of that. So what does that mean? That means that if I get my math right, 200 people are doing 80% of the total work, 40 people are doing 64% of the total work, 8 people are doing 56% of the total work, and 1.6 people are doing 40 some odd percent, which means one person is effectively doing 25% of the work, which should blow your freaking mind. That in a 1,000-person organization, think about that, the average high school gymnasium fits 1,000 people. So go back to your high school gym, put 1,000 people in the room, take 992 of them and put them on one side, and take 8 and put them on the other, and realize that each of those groups is doing the same amount of work, effectively half. And of those 8, one of them is doing the majority of that work, is doing half of that work. That's the Pareto distribution. And it's true in every organization. What's insane about the Pareto distribution is most businesses try to fight it because they're run by Ivy League, Goldman Sachs douchebags that don't understand business because they've never built anything, because they're incapable of building anything, because they're bean counters and spreadsheet number crunchers. And so what do? They see an existential crisis on a spreadsheet and they say, oh my goodness, there's a key man insurance risk. We need to diversify the risk. So we're going to spread the risk across multiple resources. So they've taken this hierarchical structure that is a Pareto distribution. Imagine a pyramid in your mind's eye, okay? And take those same 1,000 people that we had a moment ago, and you're going to put the lowest performing people at the base of the pyramid. And the people that perform a little bit better move up to the next level of the pyramid. And the people that perform better move up to the next level, so on and so forth. All of your best people are at the top of the pyramid. What do most organizations try to do? They try to diversify their risk, which means they try to flatten the hierarchy. Well, the output of the pyramid scales inversely. So the pyramid tapers at the top, but the output expands. So they're getting rid of their highest output. And I see it over and over and over and over again. When I sold a marketing agency in October 2022 for an 8-figure sum to a private equity-backed MarTech, which was a big gobbledygook way of saying I made a bunch of money. And what was interesting about it is at the time, we had 200 clients. We had $100 million in ad spend under management. One employee was responsible for 40% of my revenue. One employee. You probably know him. His name's John Moran. He's the greatest Google Ads mind who ever lived. Most businesses would not have allowed for such a significant risk. The problem is if you try to diversify the risk, if you try to take employees or clients away from John Moran, you just lose the clients. So instead of trying to fight against the Pareto principle, the key is to lean into it. Imagine for a moment if the base of your pyramid is built with what everybody else has at the top of theirs, which is possible, by the way. And it's possible as soon as you reframe your thinking, change the way you think about people. People are not commodities. They can't be. The human being, just in terms of the story that is the universe, is such an improbable fact. The fact that we're these super smart, self-propagating super apes that run around building shit and solving problems and self-propagating, growing in terms of capability. You don't have to be a religious person. I even think an atheist would feel that this is more. It's unbelievable. The human person is an unbelievable truth. When you begin to look at people as miracles, you get miracles in return. And what's really interesting, and I've seen this over and over and over and over again, is you can have the same human in 2 different organizations. In an organization number 1, they're just a cog. And they're at the base of the pyramid. Their output is the absolute minimum. They're average at best. You take that same person and you put them in an organization that values them like they're a literal miracle, and you get a miracle output. And so if you feel this is preachy or soapboxy or whatever, I don't care, because I've seen it over and over and over and over and over again. I built the largest number 1 ranked Google Ads agency in the world. I've never run a Google Ads campaign end to end in my life. I wouldn't know how to. I did it through people. I built the highest performing real estate investment campaign on the planet. This was before I was a real estate investor or I'd ever sold a lead in my life. And I did it through people. I own the top Montessori marketing agency on the planet. I'm not Montessori trained. I did it through people. You can do anything if you find the right people. And that's the paradigm to assume. When employers step into the employment forum and they begin looking at You hear it in the verbiage, the way they speak. Oh, nobody wants to work these days. Everybody's lazy. If you want something done, do it yourself. When you begin thinking about people like that, those are the people that you're going to get. You will get what you're looking for. If you test my thesis on this, go look at Monster, Jobbing, any job portal, and look at the job descriptions. Look at the job postings that employers are putting up. They sound like they were written by a retired warden who just quit his job at the penitentiary. It's unbelievable the way that we talk about and think about and treat people from an employment perspective. We're trying to get the most and pay the least. Do the opposite. Pay the most. And incidentally, here's what's really interesting about the Pareto distribution is Pareto talent, true Pareto talent, they're winners. Winners want to win. And we've been taught, because people are commodities in the horrible thesis that is all business management, well, what do you do with commodities? You try to get more for less. So we've been taught, pay people as little as you can and try to get the most out of them. But when you're dealing with something as potent as the Pareto distribution, all you need to do is pay 10% more than the high water mark. Now, that's not an insignificant sum of money, by the way. If the high water mark, to use round numbers because I'm bad at math, is 100 grand, that means that you need to pay $110,000. And that's the high water mark. You're probably paying, 75 or 60, depending on where you are. But when you pay 10% more than the high water mark, you don't get 10% more output. That's the brilliance of this input-output disparity of the Pareto distribution. You get 5, 10, 100 times more than you do when you try to squeeze people for every last drop. The other thing that's really interesting is when you take the concept, the idea, the need for money off of the table, it stops being a question. People shouldn't have to worry about how they're going to eat. Every human deserves the opportunity to earn enough to live, save, and play. And if you can put people in that position, and this is especially true for non-entrepreneurs, by the way, they stop worrying about money. You take the question of money off of the table, and then they do what all people do, which is they pursue purpose. They pursue purpose. You want to give people the opportunity to pursue purpose. And now you might think to yourself, well, the job I'm offering doesn't allow for purpose. You're wrong. You're wrong. The current EA that I have right now, she's brilliant. Her name's Josefina. She's one of the best executive assistants I've ever had in my entire life. Josefina is a child psychologist. She lives in Buenos Aires, Argentina, where working as a child psychologist does not satiate her financial needs. So what does she do? She works for me. Working for me, I promise you, is not Josefina's purpose. I promise that. But she's amazing. And I pay her enough so that she doesn't have to worry about money. And when she's not working for me, she's helping children, which is her life's purpose. So even if the job you're offering isn't a concentric circle with their purpose, it still might be the conduit through which their purpose is accomplished. And because you become the conduit, you become important. And you can be important to them and they can be important to you. But to have those people, you have to treat them like miracles. You have to look for miracles, expect miracles, and treat them like miracles. And that, by the way, it's really interesting because all the things that you hate about employment, and I hope I'm not casting aspersions. These are all mistakes that I've made, by the way. So I'm not telling you you're a horrible, evil person. I'm telling you that I've been a horrible, evil person in the past, and I've learned from my mistakes. As a young man and an employer, I tried to do all those things. I tried to get the most for the least. I tried to get the cheapest folks. I thought everybody was lazy, and I had to do everything myself. When you begin treating people like miracles, everything that you hate about being an employer goes away. All the inspect what you expect, and I have to check everything that everybody does, and nobody ever delivers anything on time, and nobody cares as much as me. You're wrong. You're wrong because you get these people that are unfreaking believable. I've always felt like entrepreneurship feels like I'm pulling a sled up a muddy hill by myself, and I've got these leather straps that I've just pulled over my shoulders, and that's what's anchored me to the sled, and they're digging into my skin, and it's cutting, and I can feel just the flesh splitting, and I'm bleeding, and I'm by myself, and I'm sweaty, and I'm tired, and every time I stop, I start sliding back down this hill. And when I would hire somebody, I would hire them, and then I'd throw them onto the sled, and they were just one more weight for me to pull up this hill, because whatever it was that they were doing, I had to watch, I had to manage, I had to inspect, and they never did it as well as me. And when you hire Pareto talent, when you hire miracles, they grab a strap, they hook it up to the sled, and they help you pull. And what's unbelievable, and where I've made all my money, incidentally, is when you start to find the people that pull harder, faster, and better than you. Most employers are afraid of competence. They don't realize it. They don't understand their own fear or their own psyche. Most employers, especially young employers, young entrepreneurs, they're afraid of not being smarter than the people they're hiring. They're afraid of not being the smartest person in the room. So they hire people that are manageable, let's say. The problem with a manageable person is they need to be managed. So seek out people that are better than you along whatever level of analysis you're hiring them for. And don't be worried about everything that enters your mind when I say that. Wow, what if they steal my clients? What if they steal my business? What if they, move on without me? Those are risks that all can be massively mitigated and, interestingly, are mitigatable specifically with Pareto talent. Here's what's really interesting about Pareto talent. The vast majority of the time, they're not entrepreneurial. John Moran, who I mentioned earlier, I sold a business for 8 figures. 40% of the revenue is being managed by one guy. He and I had worked together for half a decade plus. Well, we'd been business partners for half a decade. He was an employee that became a business partner because I had to give him a little equity to make sure he didn't leave. At any point, he could have taken every single one of those clients and struck out on his own. Here's what's really interesting. After we sold that agency, do you want to know what he did? He went and he got another job. And he'll be the first one to tell you, he doesn't want the risk, he doesn't want the responsibility. Being an entrepreneur is not his thing. He's an artist. He's a literal genius. He just wants to do the work. So the risks that you obsess over when you scare yourself away from hiring people that are better and smarter than you, I promise you they're not real risks. I've employed over 1,000 people at this point. It's never happened in a way that was actually detrimental or damaging to me. I've had people try to steal clients and start their own things all the time. More often than not, as long as they're honest about the way they're doing it, I help them. There's a host of names I can offer you. Colin Schmelbeck started as an employee. He's now one of the more famous Google ad managers on Twitter. I helped him launch his agency. I refer work to him. He told me exactly what he was doing the whole time. We had a phenomenal, very synergistic, symbiotic relationship. Danish Ashrafi, same thing. I helped him launch his agency and his business. I refer work to him all the time. When your employees see that you're an ascension opportunity, you actually attract better talent and they stay with you longer. You don't risk midnight move-outs because people are going to start businesses on their own regardless of whether or not you sanction it because you don't own them. It's one of the questions that pisses me off beyond anything else is when people are like, oh, how do I retain top talent? You don't. You don't. Top talent doesn't want to be retained. They want to grow. So the smartest, most effective people, they don't want to stay with you. This isn't slave labor. They're going to stay with you for as long as the value proposition meets their needs. And the day that it doesn't, they're going to move on. So the thing that you need to do is say, hey, before you move on, if you don't mind, please help me find and train your replacement. And I'm going to be real friendly in the departure. And now you have the benefit of top talent for as long as you are worth their time because it's a trade. It's symbiosis. It's synergistic. It needs to be 1 + 1 = 3. And the minute a person isn't benefiting from that relationship, you shouldn't want them to stay. To ask them to stay is to ask them to sacrifice themselves on your behalf. And again, anybody who would ask for that, I don't think deserves the honor of being an employer. I think this is the most important message I've ever had to deliver. And I know how holier than thou it can sound. So I think I want to back up and say that I've made all these mistakes first. And I've been on the wrong side of the way that I look and think about people. And I've only ever suffered for it. But if you can treat people well, if you can look at them like they're miracles, you get something. Look at me. I don't look like a man with a plan. I'm so much more successful than I deserve to be because I just got really good at finding amazing humans. And if you want to know the real secret sauce there, go international. Most of my entrepreneurial brethren, still to this day, they only outsource their grunt work. They'll outsource cold calling, they'll outsource data entry, they outsource garbage, which is an interesting paradigm because you want to tell me that the rest of the world doesn't produce, like statistically, it would have to be the case that there are an equal number of outstanding, brilliant humans in every other country as there are in the United States, unless you're horribly racist. And maybe you are, in which case that's okay. If you're not, then it stands to reason that the bell curve from an intellectual, creative, and capability perspective is the same across all bodies of humans. And yet, if you're in the US, you're dealing with a labor pool that has access to way more opportunity, because God bless our country, right? Assuming you're in the US. So it's easy here to be an entrepreneur, or work for Google, Amazon, Microsoft, Apple, Facebook, or climb the corporate ladder. So the labor pool that's available to you here is actually diminished when compared to emerging nations. Like if you go to an emerging nation and you pay more than they are used to being paid domestically, and you treat them like they're real humans, it's sad how far that goes, how poorly people are treated internationally. And when you find these international labor markets and you give them real work, real fulfilling work, so many people are like, oh, I've tried outsourcing and that didn't work. It's like, well, what did you outsource? Yeah, they had to make 500 cold calls a day. Okay, how long would you last in that business? How long could you possibly go doing that job and how well would you perform? So if you've had bad experience outsourcing, I would ask you to look at what it was that you were outsourcing. And instead, go find these literal miracles, look for Pareto talent, pay more than other people are willing to pay, and you get folks that are unbelievably committed, dedicated, and grateful. One of my favorite places to outsource to right now is Latin America, Argentina, Colombia. I'm trying to crack the code on Venezuela. I'm still working through that. They have some infrastructure issues. It's an immensely potent labor pool, and most people won't trust them with real knowledge process outsourcing is the term. So there's business process outsourcing, which is the grunt work. Knowledge process outsourcing is like the mind work. And somebody doesn't have to be an emerged nation in order to be smart enough to do that job. So you can really benefit, and the financial arbitrage is just insane. I can pay Argentinians 3 to 5 times what they make domestically, and it's still a fraction of what I have to pay here to get that same talent. And you can go on and on about all the American jobs I'm stealing. I can tell you I'm not, because those people don't want to work for me. They want to work for bigger companies with massive benefits and high rises and $12 croissants in the conference room and foosball tables and a bunch of shit that I just don't have. So put yourself in a position to benefit from the global labor market. And my whole business, every business I've ever owned, has been majority international talent, and talent in roles that most of my peers wouldn't put them in. I feel like this got real preachy, but I'm going to post it anyway. Excited to see the comments. Anybody who wants to yell at me, I welcome that. Appreciate y'all's time and attention. And if nothing else, I hope all I've done is encourage you to change the way that you think about hiring and managing people.